For the first time today, the Vatican put on public display bone fragments believed to be the remains of St. Peter.
Beneath the Vatican's majestic halls, there's a tomb that stayed sealed for nearly 2,000 years. For ages, historians could only imagine what it might contain. When it was finally opened, the truth inside wasn't just shocking, it completely rewrote history.
Scientific tests conducted on the 9 bone fragments, now resting in a jewel box inside a bronze case.
And that's only the beginning. We're diving into empty graves tied to eerie mysteries, secret tunnels used in times of danger, and hidden rooms filled with tales of scandal and betrayal. These discoveries will leave you speechless. Let's dive in.
St. Peter was one of Jesus' 12 apostles. His spirit, Catholics believe, now guards the gates of heaven.
The tomb of St. Peter. Simon of Bethsaida was just a rough-hewn fisherman until he met Jesus. When his teacher turned around and called him Peter, everything changed. He swapped nets for sandals and set off on a journey that would shake the ancient world. By the time Peter reached Rome, the city was buzzing with rumors of a strange new sect. Under Nero's rule, Christians were seen as enemies of the state. Tradition holds that Peter was arrested, forced to carry his own cross to the circus of Nero, and crucified upside down because he felt unworthy to die the same way as his master. His body was laid in a simple trench grave just outside the city walls. Centuries later, in the early 300s, Emperor Constantine ordered a grand church built over that little burial spot. Pilgrims carved their names in the soft tufa rock around the grave. Some scratched prayers, others left small tokens of clay and oil. A 2nd century pilgrim named Gaius even referred to the spot as the Trophy of Peter, as though it were a prized relic to be honored. Fast forward to 1939. A cave-in under what is now St. Peter's Basilica revealed a hidden necropolis, a maze of pagan tombs, crude Christian symbols, and walls splashed with red paint. Over the next decade, Vatican archaeologists worked in silence, carefully mapping every scrap of bone and pottery shard they found. In the 1950 Christmas season, Pope Pius XII stunned the world. Beneath the high altar, in a small chamber called the Confessio, lay the bones of a man aged around 67 from the 1st century. Many believed these were Peter's remains. Margherita Guarducci, Italy's leading archaeologist, pointed to faded Greek inscriptions reading, "Peter is here," and "Peter went up," clues too precise to ignore.
How could something so historically important just be forgotten?
This is really a mystery.
The story didn't stop there. In 2002, another marble sarcophagus appeared nearby, inscribed Paolo Apostolo Mart. Carbon dating years later confirmed it held bones from the Apostle Paul, uniting 2 pillars of the early church in one underground city. In 2013, Pope Francis placed Peter's relics in a new golden reliquary under the basilica's main altar, inviting worshippers to lean close and feel the weight of history. Today, visitors on the Scavi tour walk inches above where Peter once knelt in prayer, amid tunnels that hum with the memory of faith and sacrifice. Yet, as the dust settled on Peter's resting place, one more whisper of something hidden still lingers. The secret Boura Apartments. Deep within the Vatican's massive walls sits a suite of 6 rooms that once belonged to one of history's most divisive popes, Rodrigo Borgia, better known as Alexander VI. Far from plain, these chambers were designed to impress and to intimidate. When Alexander VI took the tiara in 1492, he brought with him a taste for luxury and a knack for political chess. He tapped the painter Bernardino Pinturicchio and a legion of assistants to turn his private quarters into a living manifesto of power. Every inch of wall and ceiling bloomed with color, bold reds, deep blues, and gold leaf that caught the candlelight. Step into the Hall of Mysteries, and you'll find scenes of the Annunciation and the Visitation, each painted so lifelike you can almost hear Mary's whisper. Next door, the Hall of Saints honors figures like Cecilia and Sebastian, guardians of faith who stood firm even when Rome threatened to tear them apart. Above, the vaults curve like a giant shell, covered in delicate stucco reliefs of angels and heraldic beasts. Then there's the Room of the Sibyls, where female prophets from classical lore gaze down as if delivering secret messages. Their faces, framed by swirling draperies, hint at prophecies yet to be revealed. The Hall of the Liberal Arts celebrates grammar, rhetoric, and music in playful allegory, each figure holding a tool of learning, a nod to the Pope's desire to be seen as not only a religious leader, but a patron of knowledge. The Room of the Creed illustrates the Nicene Creed in 10 panels, while the final chamber, the Room of the Emperors, lines its walls with portraits of Roman rulers, an unmistakable reminder of the Pope's link to ancient authority. Beneath your feet, fragments of rare Moorish tiles still peek through the worn stone floor. After Alexander VI died in 1503, Pope Pius III ordered the doors shut, sealing the apartments for 3 centuries. Legends say that in those dark years, rats gnawed at scrolls and layers of dust swallowed oil lamps. But the frescoes held on, silent witnesses to whispered plots of war and marriage alliances that had been drawn up here. It wasn't until 1889 that Pope Leo XIII gave the apartments new life, celebrating their artistry and history. Today, visitors to the Vatican Library pause in hushed awe before these walls. The vivid hues seem to hum with gossip of Borgia intrigues, the clink of goblets in candlelit feasts, and the faint echo of secrets that still wait to be uncovered. The Vanishing of Emmanuela Orlandi, July 22, 1983, began like any other summer day inside Vatican City for 15-year-old Emmanuela Orlandi. She waved goodbye to her friends after music class, promising to meet her sister later that evening. But she never made it home. Instead, Emmanuela simply disappeared. No notes, no calls, no clues beyond an empty street. Her father worked for the Vatican's financial office, so the Orlandi family lived behind those ancient walls, expecting safety. Instead, they found themselves caught in a cloud of whispers. Some said Emmanuela had been kidnapped to force the Vatican Bank into loosening its grip on a shady deal. Others swore a clandestine ring was using the city-state's immunity to traffic young girls. Even Mehmet Ali Acha, the man who tried to kill Pope John Paul II, got dragged into the chatter, thanks to letters linking him to secret deals in Rome. Investigators chased every lead. In 2012, a tip sent them to the tomb of a known Roman mobster, thinking someone might have buried Emmanuela's remains there as a twisted message. The dig turned up nothing, just damp soil and a fresh set of questions. Then came the tip that shook everyone in 2019. If you want to find Emmanuela, look where the angel is pointing. That angel is part of a white marble statue in the Teutonic Cemetery, perched above 2 19th-century tombs. One belonged to Princess Sophie von Hohenlohe, the other to Princess Charlotte Frederica of Mecklenburg. In late 2019, under cameras and keening headlines, Vatican authorities pried open those crypts. Inside, empty halls, no princess bones, no sign of Emmanuela, only the echo of questions. How could graves marked for nearly 2 centuries be totally hollow? Church historians point to 19th and early 20th century renovations. Maybe remains were moved, maybe lost in shifting ground. Yet no record explains where they went. Each empty crypt dug the hole deeper. If renovations stole the princess's bones, did they wash away every record? Or did someone deliberately clear the tombs to mislead the search? Some experts even suggest a single caretaker might have stumbled on a secret so big they covered every trace. More than 4 decades on, Emmanuela's family still asks the same question. What happened to their girl? A few bone fragments once surfaced near an old Vatican well, but DNA tests proved they belonged to sheep. Despite occasional rumors, a stranger seen near the Vatican wall, a coded letter hand-delivered to the press, nothing concrete has emerged. The statue angel stands quietly today, its gaze fixed on those empty crypts. It seems to whisper that the real story lies somewhere else, perhaps in a forgotten ledger or the memory of a lone guard. But this vanished girl is only the start. Beyond those high walls, a darker maze awaits, one carved in stone, etched in shadow, and echoing with the prayers of long-gone pilgrims. The Catacombs of St Kixtus. Beneath the busy roads of Rome, about 50 feet underground, stretches the Catacombs of St Kixtus. Over 20 kilometers of narrow hallways twist and turn like veins in the earth, bearing silent witness to 500,000 burials. These weren't just graves. They were a hidden city for Rome's early Christians. Pope Calixtus I, in the early 200s AD, gave church members this vast underground resting place when overground cemeteries were scarce. Over the next 2 centuries, vault after vault carved into soft tufa stone filled up. In one chamber known as the Crypt of the Popes, at least 9 early pontiffs were laid to rest, their names still faintly painted on the walls. Stroll deeper and you'll find frescoes of the Good Shepherd, Christ depicted as a gentle lamb tender, and simple Christian symbols, a fish, an anchor, 2 birds drinking from a cup. In a corner, an unlikely figure appears, Orpheus playing his lyre, surrounded by animals. To Greeks, he was the music maker who calmed beasts. To early Christians, he stood for Christ, whose word tamed fear itself. Over the centuries, layers of earth and debris threatened to bury these tunnels forever. But in 1991, after years of careful work, a major restoration began. Walls were shored up, crumbling frescoes painstakingly refreshed, and pathways cleared. In 2015, when Pope Francis opened the Jubilee Year of Mercy,
the opening of the Holy Doors begins the Jubilee every 25 years. For the first time,
the Vatican pushed to make Calixtus a must-see for pilgrims. Today, visitors slip on hard hats and wind through dim lights, pausing to read ancient graffiti, names carved by travelers seeking hope or giving thanks for miracles. Recent digs near the San Sebastiano entrance have turned up marble fragments from old sarcophagi, long separated by quarrying and road building. These relics now live in a new on-site museum, each piece a crumb of a larger tale. A sculpted hand, a fragment of inscription, a corner of relief showing a palm branch for martyrdom. Walking those tunnels, you feel the weight of centuries in every drip of water, every chipped wall. It's easy to forget you're still in Rome. Each step is a reminder that beneath the grand basilicas and crowded piazzas, a quieter story of faith and survival runs on, waiting for each visitor to listen. Passetto di Borgo, the secret escape corridor. You could be wandering just outside St. Peter's Basilica and never notice a hidden tunnel snaking overhead. That's the Passetto di Borgo, an 800-meter brick walkway built in 1277 by Pope Nicholas III to link the Vatican with the old mausoleum-turned-fortress of Castel Sant'Angelo. On the map, it looks like a straight shot, but up close, it feels more like a secret world pressed against the city. The corridor is only about 2.5 meters wide, just enough for 2 people to walk side by side, and it sits roughly 5 meters above street level. Its walls are made of sturdy travertine and brick, patched and rebuilt over the centuries. You'll spot narrow slits where lookouts could peek out toward the river Tiber or the rooftops of Borgo. And every few dozen meters there's a tiny chamber once used for weapons, provisions, or even a quick rest. In 1585, Pope Sixtus V added a hidden spiral stair and reinforced sections near Castel Sant'Angelo, making the route even more secure. The most famous dash through the Passetto came in May 1527, when Emperor Charles V's troops sacked Rome. Pope Clement VII and his inner circle slipped into the corridor under the cover of dawn, their shoes echoing on the cold stone as they hurried toward the castle's thick walls. By the time the mercenaries rampaged through St. Peter's Square, the Pope was safe behind drawbridges and battlements, and the church held onto a fragile calm in the storm that followed. Legend says Clement stayed locked inside Castel Sant'Angelo for months, only emerging when the last foreign soldier had left the city. Long before and long after, the Passetto saw other moments of panic and pomp. In 1494, during Charles VIII's invasion, Pope Alexander VI reportedly inspected the tunnel's defenses. In quieter times, envoys whispered behind its walls, and stories persisted of secret treasure cellars, hidden offshoots where Vatican riches were stored. Some visitors swear they hear ghostly footsteps in the darkness, a guard from centuries past, still on watch. Today, only part of this eerie corridor opens on rare guided tours, usually during holy years, when you can feel the cool hush settle in. Restoration work in 2014 revealed faded fresco fragments and the original iron rings used to hang lanterns. As you move from light to shadow, you can almost taste the centuries. The fear of armies at the gates, the relief of safe refuge, the silent grit of those who built this lifeline. The Vatican's Shadow War. World War II cast a long shadow over Europe, and even within the Vatican's walls, whispers of horror and hope found their way into hidden archives. In December 1942, a German Jesuit named Lothar Koenig sent a letter to Pope Pius XII's secretary, Robert Lieber. It described daily gassings of up to 6,000 Jews and Poles at Belzec, details so grim they would make headlines only decades later. That letter was part of a fragile web of information flowing into Rome. After signing the 1933 Reichskonkordat with Hitler's government, the Vatican treaded carefully, balancing a public stance of neutrality with a private network of priests, nuns, and diplomats, quietly relaying news of atrocities. Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, nicknamed the Scarlet Pimpernel of the Vatican, helped hide Allied soldiers and Jewish refugees in convents and monasteries. Some estimates say he saved over 6,500 lives. Historians still debate how much Pope Pius XII knew and when. His Christmas broadcast on December 24, 1942, mentioned the hundreds of thousands who, without any fault of their own, sometimes only because of their nationality or race, have been consigned to death or to a slow decline. But many argue that it was too vague. Meanwhile, secret cables from Vatican Radio bore more pointed condemnations, sent under the codename Black Smoke. Behind the scenes, Vatican diplomats issued false baptism certificates and sheltered Jews within St. Peter's precincts. Cardinal Montini, later Pope Paul VI, passed documents to the Allies through Swiss channels, hoping to force Hitler's hand. Yet critics charge that Pius's public silence amounted to moral failure, while defenders say a louder protest would have brought down harsher reprisals. When the archives finally opened in 2020, researchers found memos showing Pius authorizing the church's Swiss Guard to escort at-risk families to safety. Another file detailed how the Holy Office converted an unused crypt into a makeshift dormitory for orphans fleeing bombing raids. The Vatican's wartime story is a tangle of courage and caution, faith and fear. Every newly released document peels back one more layer of complexity. Was silence a shield or a surrender? As scholars continue to sift through yellowing papers and faded telegrams, one thing remains clear. Sometimes the most powerful secrets are the ones carried in hushed tones behind closed doors. Raw genius. Michelangelo's slaves. Michelangelo believed every figure lived inside the marble block.
Did Michelangelo use a really long brush, or did he have really long arms?
He just had to set it free. His unfinished sculptures let us peek straight into that process. Instead of polished flesh, we see raw marble flecked with tool marks, shallow scratches where his chisel tip tested the grain, deeper cuts where he chased a new curve. That roughness isn't a flaw. It's proof of his restless mind, always pushing, never satisfied. Most famous among these are the series known as the Prigioni, the slaves, originally meant for Pope Julius II's grand tomb. The tomb's design shifted so many times that what started as over a dozen figures ended with only a handful of half-formed giants. Today, you can visit the dying slave and the rebellious slave side by side in the Louvre. One slumps in silent agony, head tipped back as if in final surrender. The other twists fiercely, muscles taut, still fighting the stone that binds him. In Florence's Accademia Gallery, you'll find the Atlas slave, shoulders hunched as if bearing the sky itself. His head and arms are gone, and yet the carved torso screams effort, every rib, every sinew carved in high relief. Nearby, two more figures, sometimes called the awakening slave, and a second unfinished slave, show other stages of his work. Some blocks remain rough and broad, others almost fully shaped, revealing how Michelangelo shifted his vision midstream. He didn't leave these pieces behind for lack of care. In letters, he complained of endless delays, wars that dried up funds, politics that toppled sponsors, and his own failing health after decades of carrying stone on his back. Yet he poured every ounce of himself into each carve and chip. His notebook sketches at Casa Buonarroti reveal erased pencil lines and fresh redrawings, mirroring the marble itself. These half-done works went on to influence countless artists. Rodin famously admired their raw power, and 20th century sculptors embraced the non-finito look as a statement about art's unfinished journey. Over 500 years later, visitors still crowd around these figures, drawn by that electric tension between stone and spirit. In the end, Michelangelo's incomplete sculptures aren't ruins, they're living documents. They capture a genius in motion, a mind leaping forward before the stone could catch up. And if you think those rough edges are all there is to them, wait till you see what waits beneath the Vatican's polished floors. Pagan Necropolis, under Vatican City. In 1574, workmen renovating St. Peter's vaulted ceiling dropped a torch into a hidden chamber, and for a heartbeat, flickering light revealed gold-tiled mosaics and a carpet of human bones. Back then, the story vanished beneath new floors and frescoed ceilings. Almost 4 centuries later, Pope Pius XII decided to lower the grottos under the basilica. Nobody expected much more than a few medieval burials. Instead, the roof of another pagan mausoleum cracked open. By 1940, archaeologists were crawling through rubble, masonry, even a gushing subterranean stream, unearthing a full necropolis 30 feet below St. Peter's. They found rows of small brick-faced tombs, once dressed in plaster and terracotta trim. Inside, walls gleamed with mosaics of dolphins and grapevines, while vaulted ceilings bore frescoes of Greek myths and Egyptian gods. Glass perfume vials, bronze buckles, and fragments of gold chains told stories of the families laid to rest here, often freedmen and mid-level officials who'd risen in Rome's vast empire. One striking landmark was the Meta Romuli.
The Meta Romuli was considered an excellent construction, an elaborate tomb with an accessible burial chamber.
A 120-foot-high pyramid tomb built in the 1st century AD, standing like a miniature of Giza. It survived into the Renaissance until Pope Alexander VI ordered its stones torn down in 1499 for new projects, but its memory lingered among these buried streets. Between the circus built by Caligula and finished by Nero and an ancient roadway, wealthy Romans planted gardens, built artificial pools for mock sea battles, and let chariots race past. Alongside, they dug family mausoleums, decorated as lavishly as their villas above ground. In one sarcophagus, a painted mosaic of a lion and a bust of Horus still gaze out through time. Amid these tombs, late 2nd century Christians carved the trophy of Gaius, 3 niches cut into a red-plastered wall, framed by tiny columns. The lower niche lay under the pavement, covered by a pierced lid. Pilgrims left offerings. Later, Christian graffiti and crude crosses scarred the buttresses added for support. When Constantine ordered his basilica built in 320 AD, he centered the apse on that red wall, dumping over 1 million cubic feet of earth to level the hill. The upper tombs vanished under builders' spoil, but these lower chambers stayed sealed in the foundations. Excavators in the 1940s and 50s battled cold, collapsing walls, and that relentless spring to reveal gold mosaics, marble sarcophagi, and even an inscription urging passers-by to sample the joys of wine and women, a lid so scandalous that church authorities broke it into pieces and hurled it into the Tiber. Today, you can slip through a narrow-lit passage beneath St. Peter's. The air chills, your footsteps echo. Faded frescoes and tesserae glint under low lights. Every carved wall, every scattered bone reminds you, the Vatican's smooth marble floors are built on centuries of tangled lives, buried hopes, and secrets waiting just below your feet. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. Deep beneath the Vatican, a group of archaeologists stood before an ancient sealed tomb. Legends had whispered about it for centuries, a mystery buried in the heart of the city. The tomb was said to hold the remains of a pope, long forgotten by history, and a curse that had sealed it tight. The entrance was guarded by an imposing lion carved from stone, its eyes glaring fiercely into the darkness. The team hesitated, the weight of history pressing down on them, but curiosity got the better of them. With careful hands, they lifted the stone lid, their tools scraping against centuries of dust. The moment they cracked it open, a low, guttural growl echoed through the chamber. They opened a sealed tomb and immediately regretted it. A sudden chill swept through the air, and the carved lion's eyes seemed to glow, its stone form almost alive. The room grew oppressive, the air thick with a presence they couldn't explain. The archaeologists, now unnerved, began to retreat, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled their bones. It was then they understood. The lion hadn't been guarding the tomb. It had been warning them. And now they were trapped, with no way to undo what they had unleashed. The Raphael rooms. What if walls could talk? Inside the Raphael rooms, they almost do. These 4 connected chambers started life as Pope Julius II's private suite back in the early 1500s. He tapped a young Raphael, already making waves in Florence, to turn plain plaster into scenes that still stop you in your tracks. From start to finish, the project stretched over 16 years, roughly 1508 to 1524, and gave birth to some of the most talked about images of the Renaissance. The first room, the Stanza della Segnatura, wears its heart on its sleeve. Here, Raphael celebrates human smarts in every form: faith, law, poetry, logic. The big draw is the School of Athens, where Plato and Aristotle stride through a marble hall that feels almost three-dimensional. If you peer closely, you'll spot Michelangelo brooding under an arch, and Raphael himself tucked in among the scholars, inkpot and brush in hand. Look for the tiny signature he hid and seeked onto a red cloak in the Heliodorus room, his way of whispering, "I was here." Turn the corner, and you're in the Stanza di Eliodoro. Scenes here read like a fast-cut movie of divine drama. Angels booting a greedy invader out of the temple, a financial crash averted by a shining sword from above. Scholars say Raphael's clever use of shadow and perspective makes those soldiers seem to burst right out of the wall. Next up is the Stanza dell'Incendio del Borgo, all about a famous fire in Pope Leo IV's day. Flames lick cathedral walls while a pointing pontiff calms the blaze with a look, and Raphael's studio pitched in too, churning out figures under his watchful eye. Notice how some characters lean so far forward that they almost tip you out of your seat. Finally, the Sala di Costantino closes the show. Painted by Raphael's students after he died in 1520, it tells the story of Emperor Constantine's big change of heart. He saw a cross in the sky, then flipped Rome's script in favor of Christianity. The style shifts here, a little more ornate and theatrical, but it sends a clear message: faith can move mountains. Over the centuries, these rooms gathered a few secrets of their own. In the 20th century, a major cleanup peeled back layers of soot and grease, revealing colors so bright historians almost blinked. Some experts now argue that hidden symbolic numbers crop up in the floor tiles and window shapes, Renaissance code for good luck or divine protection. Stepping out, you feel a pulse of voices from 500 years ago, still echoing off stone. The Courtyard of the Pine Cone. Slip past the frescoed halls of the Raphael rooms, and you land in a sunlit yard that feels both ancient and fresh. The Courtyard of the Pine Cone, or Cortile della Pina, was built by architect Donato Bramante around 1505 to link the old papal palace with a newer villa up on the hill. Today, it sits just before you reach the Sistine Chapel escalator, a calm spot where stone and bronze tell a tale older than most cities. Dominating one end is the giant bronze pine cone, standing over 4 meters tall and tipping the scales at nearly 4 tons. Carved in the 1st or 2nd century AD, it once cooled bathers in the baths of Agrippa, and later swirled water from its tip. In 1589, Pope Sixtus V moved it here, nesting it in a big niche framed by a Renaissance fountain. Back then, the yard saw choral concerts and papal parties. Legend says Pope Alexander VI even staged bullfights on its stone floors. Centered under a clear sky, you'll spot Sphere Within a Sphere, a modern marvel by Arnaldo Pomodoro, installed in 1990. At 13 meters across, this cracked globe holds a smaller sphere inside, hinting at hidden worlds within our own. Versions of it spin quietly in Dublin and at the United Nations, but here it feels at home between ancient columns, a reminder that the Vatican still looks ahead, not just back. All around, niches house busts of emperors like Augustus and Marcus Aurelius. Augustus's youthful face, inspired propaganda sculptors kept him forever 30, once greeted visitors with the weight of empire. Nearby, a giant porphyry basin from Hadrian's villa hints at meals and ceremonies lost to time. These treasures came from ruins, tombs, and even shipwrecks, each one picked up over centuries as the church hunted beauty and power alike. For a moment, ignore the no-talk sign you'll soon obey in the Sistine Chapel. There's an outdoor cafe tucked by the pine cone base, where you can sip an espresso or try a local spritz as pigeons wheel overhead. Guides often stop by 3 big panels set up here, visual previews of what you'll find beyond those chapel doors. But take a breath, wander the cobbled floor, and let the mix of stone, water, and bronze work its low-key magic. Whether you came for saints or kings, what you find in this yard is a quiet puzzle. Old meets new, faith brushes up against art, and every piece whispers its own secret. With so many mysteries hidden within its walls, what do you think is the real magic that keeps people returning to the Vatican? Its timeless art, its rich history, or something else entirely?